I hope that you are all doing well. I hope that you are all prosperous. I hope that everyone watching this is enjoying their life to the fullest. And I hope that all who are watching this are happy where they are in their station in life. The subject that I would like to talk about today is a subject that has become the topic of much debate over the last few years, and that is a very simple word that we all have heard previously, and that word is propaganda. Now, propaganda, I'm not going to go and insult the intelligence of anyone watching this by explaining what it is, but everyone knows what propaganda is. The issue that I find is in the ability of people to identify propaganda when they see it. Now, since about 2019, round about early, perhaps February, um, when COVID was in its full swing, suddenly people I noticed from over here, people I noticed suddenly became experts at identifying Chinese propaganda. And while Chinese propaganda does exist, so does Russian propaganda. So does German propaganda. So does Romanian propaganda. So does Ecuadorian propaganda. So does Chilean propaganda. Diplomacy is propaganda to a certain extent. When you have an ambassador, say to Costa Rica, living in the US or Germany or Nepal, what that ambassador is essentially trying to do is to promote his country or her country to as wide an audience as possible. And the way they do this might include videos of sunny beaches or promoting tourism or promoting mineral extraction abilities from that country, as many African countries do. And so all of this falls under the umbrella of propaganda. Now, of all these nations who are accused of producing and promoting propaganda, three stand out. And those three just happen to be the three most powerful nuclear nations of this world, which is the US, America, and China. And it's a word that only gets applied to certain countries for some reason. Propaganda, we all know what it is. It's the production of material to promote an ideal, an agenda, and in this case, a political system of thought. We see propaganda every day. Every commercial is propaganda for that product because it seeks to promote that product to as many people as possible. So the word itself is benign. The word itself has no connotation that is benevolent or malevolent. The benevolence or malevolence comes in its application. Now, propaganda, this word, in our modern times, and by modern I mean from the current year and perhaps 2012. But if we take a critical eye and look at which of those three gets accused of producing propaganda and which don't, we find that Russia and China get accused of producing propaganda far more, far more than America does. even though America has arguably the most powerful propaganda arm of the three, and that propaganda arm is called Hollywood. Now, since about June of 2016, or actually before then, when COVID started to really pick up steam, and the idea that COVID started in a Wuhan laboratory and then spread around the world, um, propaganda was produced to support this notion. And who produced that propaganda? We don't actually know. We don't actually know who produced that propaganda. We can take guesses as to who. Uh, we could say it was the military industrial complex who obviously wanted to foment an environment where from that production, then a war of some sort could naturally evolve. And so then that would equate to profits for them. We could say that, it was, we could blame it on the pharmaceutical companies who just wanted more profits. But the COVID and sort of the aftermath of COVID made it seem that it was a bit more than just some very big companies wanting to make some very big profits. Now, propaganda. Propaganda is applied to some countries, but yet not applied to others. And we have to ask ourselves why. Why is it that when a movie or a video or any kind of national promotion from China or Russia is instantly labeled as propaganda, but yet shows like Homeland or shows like Jack Ryan in the US or television series, even cartoons aimed at younger audiences like American Dad are not labeled as propaganda, even though they are. Because if we look at those shows closely and ask ourselves what is happening, what do we see? We see the CIA saving the world every time. Every time we watch those shows, we see the CIA or some facet of America or some facet of the what has been dubbed American excellence, some facet of American excellence saving the world. Now, these shows are popular. Homeland is a popular show. American Dad is a popular show. Jack Ryan is a popular show worldwide, but they are most popular inside the US. They have the most captive audiences inside the US. And if we look at these shows with an objective eye, what we see is that they are, in fact, propaganda. You can't deny it. It's impossible to deny that these shows are, in fact, propaganda. But they are propaganda not aimed at the outside world, where traditionally propaganda was aimed at, where diplomacy was aimed at. No, these shows are aimed at the American populace itself. And that should cause you some concern. And the reason why it should cause you some concern is because of a very little known act passed. And this article happened to be an article that was rejected from publication. Um, I don't know why. Everything was factual in this article, but for some reason it was rejected, which is a natural, which is just a common occurrence in journalism. You write something, and your editors either say, "Yeah, we like that, and we're going to uh, publish it," or "We don't like that, and we're not going to." And after a while, you learn to not take this personally. So now, the act I'm referring to is the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 that allowed for the production of U.S. propaganda to be spread outside of the U.S. Let me read from the article I wrote about this. The U.S. Information and Educational Exchange Act of 1948, popularly referred to as the Smith-Mundt Act, specifies the terms in which the U.S. government can engage in public diplomacy. Now, the wording is is purposely vague so as not to call it propaganda. But what is public diplomacy if not propaganda? It is important to note that almost every nation has some form of a law or a set of laws or an act like this to promote itself. Many Americans didn't even know. In fact, you could even argue that the idea of American propaganda seems almost foreign to us. Our movies are so good. They're so they're so engaging. The script writing is just is so close to reality that we just don't notice it as being propaganda. But in fact, it is just very well done propaganda. Hollywood has gotten the production of propaganda for the external market, we shall say, has gotten the formula for producing such propaganda down to such a degree that most Americans do not even notice it as such. They don't even notice it as such. In Homeland, Carrie Matheson saves the day every single day, and she does it for the CIA. In Jack Ryan, he saves the day, every single episode for the CIA. Even American Dad. Even in movies like Zero Dark 30 or any of the Mission Impossible series, there is always some facet of the American government saving the day, saving the world. And these producers and these directors and these writers, they have refined their skills to the point where other countries that can produce this level of propaganda, like Russia or China, just can't compete. They can't compete with this level of production value. And so what happens is that you have Chinese propaganda that is not as refined as American propaganda, and so it is easily identified. And this is where a massive blind spot occurs within the American experience. Now, going back to this Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, where it was set by Congress that America as a nation could produce propaganda aimed at the outside world, we see something quite interesting happen around 2012. In 2012, another act was put forth by President Obama, and this act was called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. And this revamping of the old act was added a very curious angle to the direction of where propaganda, sorry, excuse me, of where the propaganda that the original act was intended to give legality to, it gave a brand new direction to this act, and that direction was inward. The Smith-Mundt Modernization Act of 2012 gave a new direction to Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, and that direction was inward. That means towards the American people, not the outside people, not the they weren't seeking to promote America outside. No, they were seeking to change the minds of people inside America, which is unheard of, which was unheard of, and which countries like Russia and China get blamed for doing all the time. But the first black president did that. He initiated the legislative process that would turn the original Smith-Mundt Act of 1948 to include not just production of propaganda. President Obama, he turned the propaganda arm inwards into the people, the American people themselves. And we should think about this. We should think about this, and we should give much thought to what we have seen happen in America since 2012. Because if the American government has the legal authority to produce propaganda that is aimed at the American people themselves, then you have to question the things that you hear are happening.